Well, thank you for joining me for the Sunday school lesson today. I trust that you have been blessed by these narratives out of 1st and 2nd Kings. We're going to see another one of them today. The title of the lesson is God Honors. It's going to come from 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 4 through 16. 2 Kings 12, verses 4 through 16. There's an old adage which says, many people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. There's a great truth in that. I'm interested in some of the advertising on television, especially beer advertising. It seems like it's more popular than ever before. And this character, I think his name is Snoop Dogg. I don't know all that kind of stuff. I have to confess, Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra would be the names I would know. But anyhow, he says to this guy out on the beach as he's promoting this beer, he said, the best plan is no plan. I could not disagree more with him. The best plan is a plan. You'd better plan out what you're going to do. Now, I'm not talking about becoming so constrictive in your plan, but I do believe in the adage, you will plan to fail if you don't plan. You have to learn how to plan. Now, learning how to plan is one thing. Prioritizing what you plan to do is a different thing altogether. You have to prioritize as well. For instance, if I were to ask you today, what are the priorities of your life? What would be the number one priority of your life? Well, for most of it, it would be for our mate and for our children. But biblically, the priority of our life, how do I bring honor to God? How do I bring honor to God? That should be the priority of our life. Now, in that priority of how do I bring glory to God, has to fall out the priority of family. That's God's design. That's not my design. Family is important to God. He created man and woman, one man, one woman, one lifetime. The pastor has been so clear on that in what he's been teaching lately. So this idea of one man, one woman, one life, that's God's plan. That's not my plan. Now, normally, when there's one man and one woman, there's soon 3, 4, or more. I have a family that I've been preaching in the church for a number of years now, once a year. They have 14 children. Same mother, same father. 14 children. Now, I don't know how you'd handle 14 children. We had 3, and that was enough for us. That's not true for every family. That was enough for us. You have to prioritize your marriage. In the priority of your marriage, your spouse comes first. Always. Not the children. It's the spouse that comes first. Then the children. Now, sometimes that gets to be a delicate balance. I know, I understand. Been there, been a daddy a long time. This balance of priority. And then out of that priority of family has to be the priority of how am I going to take care of my family? What am I going to do? What is my work? What is my job? How do I get this done? I have to take care of my family. And then the other priorities fall into place along the way. In the 26 years I was executive director of the Florida Baptist Convention, I realized the first year I was there that I have a problem. There was no criticism to the former executive director or his staff. I have a problem. I don't know how to get a handle on this staff situation. For instance, when I was pastor of a church, every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, we had a staff meeting because everybody lived in Shreveport, Louisiana. I could have a staff meeting. Every Monday morning, I had a staff meeting. Well, now, when I came to Florida, I had an entire state, eventually about 3,000 churches and missions and campuses. So about 3,000. And I had a staff larger than anything I'd ever imagined. And they go from Pensacola to Miami. How do I control the priorities of this staff? And we came upon this idea. I needed it for myself. I didn't know how to think it through and put it into place at the time. So I had 3 of our staff members work on it as a project, and they came up with what we came to call the OGAP process. OGAP process. And in this process, when we finished prioritizing everything that we were doing as a Florida Baptist Convention, it ran so smoothly. We could give an account for every dollar that was going to every place. Objective, what is our number one objective as churches? To win people to faith in Jesus Christ and to grow them in the knowledge of Jesus Christ and to train our leadership. That was our objective. And then we had to come underneath that to make some goals. If we wanted to baptize 100,000 people a year or 25,000 people a year, you have to set a goal of how you're going to do it. Then you have an action plan, how to get it done. Now, I'm not suggesting every family needs to go through that process, but I am suggesting if you don't have a plan of some kind that prioritizes, you're going to miss much of the glory of God. You're going to miss much of the sanctity of marriage. We need to get it done in the right way. So now there are 2 names critically that will come to play in our narrative this time. It's the name Jehoiada. Jehoiada is the priest. And then the name Joash, who becomes the king at 7 years of age and reigns for 40 years. Now you can imagine all of the structure that had to be done. A 7-year-old boy becoming a king of a nation and then lasting for 40 years. Most of the time that Joash was king, it was a good time for Israel. Elisha was the prophet, but died during that period. God continued to extend grace to his wayward people. And soon, Uzziah became the king, and he followed the Lord, subdued the Philistines, and the king's pride led to the attempt to usurp the priestly duties of Jehoiada and the others, and the Lord struck him down with leprosy. Then there was a series of evil kings, and when Ahaz died, his son Hezekiah ruled over Judah, and we're going to talk about that today. So look at 2 Kings chapter 12. 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 4 through 16. And Joash, spelled it 2 different ways, said to the priest, all the money of the dedicated things that are brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of every one that passes the account, the money every man is set at and all the money that comes into a man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord. Let the priest take it to them, every man of his acquaintance. Let them repair the breaches of the house, wheresoever any breach shall be found. Now, Joash is taking charge to demonstrate. He wants to reconstruct, and he wants to do what's right in pleasing God with the temple. So this first recorded action of Joash demonstrates his faithfulness to God as he speaks to the priest about repairing the house of God. And the priests were to oversee the project to begin with. Now he explained the funding would go this way, and every money that was brought would be used just like it was given to be used, to pay the workers, to buy the materials, to get whatever done that needs to be done, the hewn stone that had to be replaced. And so as the money passes into these accounts, the way is set for them to take care of it. And they come bringing this money that they're going to give. But not only money, chances are some could not give money, but they would give an animal for sacrifice. And so they would give something to help restore worship in Israel as they had known it. So this monetary gift. He even instructed the Levites to go to Judah City and take private donations as well. Now, I don't know how long it had been since the temple had been built by Solomon. Materials were gathered by David, by the way, but because he was a man of war, Solomon is the one who got to build the temple. And Solomon took a long time to get it done. Let every priest go to his acquaintance. He's talking about talk to the people you know about knowing, or sell yourself to the people so that they will know what we're doing in trying to rebuild the temple. Your co-workers, those who are neighbors to you, take responsibility to repair. It had been over 125 years since Solomon built the temple. And in that 125 years, things had gone to pot and something had to be done. So they had to prioritize what they're going to do. Now that's the first one that comes from Joash, the king, as he tells them what they need to do. Now look at verses 6 through 8. But it was so that in the 23rd year, the 23rd year of King Joash, the priest had not repaired the breaches in the house. Isn't that amazing? In 23 years, collecting all of the money, they had not gotten the job done that needed to be done. Then King Joash called Jehoiada, the priest. It must have been a tough thing for him. Now, I didn't tell you part of the story I should have earlier. Jehoiada, the priest, hid Joash, the boy, to keep him from being slaughtered by the king and wiping out that household. And Joash now is having to call Jehoiada on the carpet for not getting the job done that he authorized him to do. He called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said unto them, Why have you not repaired the breaches of the house? Receive no more money of your acquaintance, deliver it for the breaches of the house. And the priest consented and received no more money of the people, neither to repair the breaches of the house. Now, he is simply saying that you have had 23 years in the gathering of the money and you haven't done the job. It has to be done. He calls him on the carpet and asks him why it hasn't been done already. Now you can put it down. Leadership must be held accountable. Now let me pick up this thing of accountability just a little bit in terms of leadership. I believe every pastor ought to have a group to whom he is accountable in the church. Whether it's the deacons, whether it's the trustees, whether it's a smaller group, there has to be some accountability on the part of the leader to someone else, and they must be held accountable. He cannot simply say, God told me to do this. There is an accountability factor even for the man of God. Now, I believe I've heard from the Lord of things that we need to do. I believe that with all of my heart. But I never just simply launched out to do them without knowing that I'm being held accountable when I make this suggestion. I am being held accountable to God as well as by these particular men or this particular group. So accountability on the part of the priest, the clergy, the accountability factor is a must factor for me. And so leadership is accountable, and when they do not give the priority to the task. Now, the priority of the task simply means this. I know what a preacher needs to do. I know every Monday morning I have to get up, start planning for the next Sunday. Someone asked me one time, what have you been doing since seminary? I replied, getting ready for Sunday. That's what you do as a pastor. You get ready for Sunday. And I don't believe, as some do, and I guess there's still some of those around, all I have to do on Sunday morning is open the scripture, and wherever it opens, that's where I preach. I think that's nonsensical. That's not how it goes. You work on those sermons. You do the best job of exegetical study you can. You look at the commentaries. You look at other preachers' sermons on the subject. You find a routine that you get into in your study, and you stay in that study until you pound out that sermon. You just simply have to pound it out. It's hard work, pounding out that sermon. I know I must get ready for Sunday. I know as a pastor also that I had a sense of responsibility, though I did not do it all myself because of the size of the church. Now, when I was in a small church, I did it all by myself. I had to visit the sick. I had to bury the dead. That's part of the job. That's part of who I am. That's part of my responsibility. And that is a priority of taking care of the folks. A priority. I must also be a teacher as well. Now, I make some distinction between teaching and preaching. Not everybody does, but I do make a distinction between preaching and teaching. And so you have to get ready to preach on Sundays, and then you teach maybe on Wednesday nights or a Tuesday Bible study or whatever it might be. But you have the responsibility of taking what you know and helping other people to come to understand what God's doing in the life of the church. You oftentimes must set a good example for others to follow. And so that too is part of the priority of being a priest or a pastor, whatever it might be. Now look at verse 9, where there comes a solution. Now this will be very interesting to some of you folks who have been at First Baptist Church downtown Jacksonville for a long time. In verse 9, but Jehoiada the priest took a chest, bored a hole in the lid, and set it beside the altar, on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the Lord's house. How many of you remember here at the church? And I just barely remember because it was going out about the time we joined the church. At least it wasn't as active. But one of the things I heard about the First Baptist Church of Jacksonville when I arrived in Florida, I had no background for Florida, by the way. I had only been to Florida to preach a couple of times, maybe a half a dozen. But I heard about the chest of Joash at First Baptist Church, Jacksonville. Now, what that chest was is that you made a pledge, you made a commitment of what you were going to do financially for the next year. As I understand the chest of Joash, what you were going to do financially the next year in the life of the church. And you'd put either a percent down or you would put a number down, and that could be extrapolated. If you put a percent down, what they did last year, the chances are they won't do less than they did last year. I don't know how all that was calculated, and I don't need to know how all that was calculated. But I do remember one time I got to put mine in the chest of Joash. And so as a result of that, chest of Joash, I'm not sure I told you just right. I was sure that mine went in. I was not there on that Sunday, but a friend put my and Nancy's commitment card in the chest of Joash. I don't even know whether that chest is still around or not. If it is, it should be archived. It was a genius idea and apparently paid great dividends, the chest of Joash. That's how it started, right here, to build accountability on the part of the leadership of Israel. And they took these contributions and supported the project with the gifts that had been given. Worship in Joash's day, who brought their designated offerings to the temple, had a sense of responsibility. So that's a bit of history of how the chest of Joash came from Scripture to First Baptist Church of Jacksonville, Florida. Now look at verses 10 through 12. Verses 10 through 12. And so it was when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. And they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work. Now, in verses 10 through 12, I didn't read that quite far enough, did I? And they gave the money, being told, into the hands of those that did the work, and those that had oversight of the house of the Lord, and laid it out to the carpenters, the builders, wrought upon the Lord's house, to the masons, the hewer of stones, and to buy timber, hewn stone, to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord, for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Now, apparently the temple was in pretty bad shape, but there was a huge amount of money that came in to help rebuild the temple. How refreshing when God's people see something and they rise to the occasion and they do what needs to be done. So here's the scribe who simply helps the king to know what's going on. He would be the person in our parlance, chief of staff of the President of the United States of America. When they saw how much money it was, they realized if they did it right, they had the money to get the job accomplished. And so accuracy in the counting. But I think the genius of this idea was both the palace and the priesthood oversaw the project and provided mutual accountability. So not just the priest, but the council of the king as well. And they put it together. Had oversight of the Lord's house. the carpenters and the builders. Now, the carpenters were the woodworkers. I have one of my granddaughters is married to a fine young man who is an excellent wood carver. He just knows how to do that kind of stuff. And he made me not long ago because Nancy had always taken care of the birthdays. Well, now when we had 4 or 5, that was easy, but when we got up to 23, that took a job of doing. And so he made for me a board, and on this board, every month of the year, and under the month, the date and the name of the person who had a birthday. All I have to do, and it's a very attractive board, we're very well done. And in fact, I encourage him, you need to make some of these and take them and display them at some shop somewhere or some market somewhere. I believe people would buy them. So it looks like a nice piece of furniture. He really does a magnificent job. And so all I have to do now is look at the month, and I know whose birthday's coming that month. June's a big birthday month for the Sullivan family, a big birthday month. So just to say, this idea of accountability that comes, and the workers of the wood and the builders. These are the construction workers. God expects us to take care of the money that comes in to the treasury. God expects us to take care. Now, we always had, as a church, 2 kinds of gifts. One was the undesignated, which was the tithe. I tithe, have been tithing since I was saved. I tithe, and I try to go above the tithe. But that's not the issue I'm talking about. We have an undesignated. I do not say, use my tithe to help build this or to help do that. No. Then we have what we call a designated side of giving. Lottie Moon Christmas offering is a dedicated side of giving. You can't use that money for anything else. You use that money for anything else, you have betrayed the integrity of what it was trying to accomplish. And integrity is very important. Closing, I want to get this word in about integrity. I've been saying it for so long, it's such a part of me. Integrity is something no one can take from you. You decide to give it up. That's your decision. And once you have given up integrity, it's hard to rebuild integrity. Don't give up integrity. And they finally came to the place, they got the temple and the action, and the Lord was pleased with what was going on. Now, when we know that God's going to provide for us and God's going to do those things that we need done, and God's going to help, God's going to honor what we do because we honor what He does. Thank you for joining me for the Sunday School lesson. God bless you.